sitting with Ule Linsmar, who is the founder of SoapUI. And for anyone who's watching this or joining us for the first time on this series, what this is a series of interviews with the founders of some of your favorite products, or maybe some products that you are considering using. This is not a series to tell you more about those products, but more about the founders behind them and what went into the building of those products, the growing of those companies, the ideas, how they took it from idea to where they are today. So you can learn a little bit more about the thought that went into these very successful companies, open source projects, and other projects that we're interviewing the founders of, as well as if you are perhaps an aspiring entrepreneur yourself, some advice that you can certainly take to heart as you consider your own path going forward. So Ule, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Noel. It's a pleasure to be here. Man, it's almost 20 years since SoapUI was kind of originally kicked off as a code base. It's just crazy. It's a long time back.
It is, and
time flies.
It does. I did a little homework on you before this interview and read where you've been asked probably on more than one occasion why you created SoapUI. And you stated, like some of our other founders that we've spoken to before, you were working on a complex software project, and after discovering the lack of a tool that would help you out, that creating the tool yourself rather than just continuing to struggle with it seemed like a natural move and something you were able to do. So I'd love to know some more context there. It's such an interesting kind of shared quality of the entrepreneurial spirit of a helpful project or solution doesn't exist, so build it.
Yeah, I think it's a very common denominator for successful open source projects in general. I think scratching the itch, that the developers have. They have a problem they need to solve. As you said, I was an architect in an infrastructure project where I was a consultant, and we were building what at that time was a service-oriented architecture. Today you'd call it microservices, using the SOAP stack, which was popular at the time, and there weren't really any good tools to help you really easily explore and try out your SOAP web services or APIs. And there were some commercial tools, and as a developer, I wasn't interested in buying something. The only open source tooling out there that was really out there, I think JMeter had some SOAP support and some others, and it was just really cumbersome to very, very basic exploration of those web services. So, I was up nights at the time, often with our second child, and keeping him company, and started coding away out this project. Thought, maybe I could build something that would help us improve our process, and that was kind of the starting point of it. I think at the time, there were other tools that were inspiring. There was a tool called XML Spy. I don't know if you remember, by a company called Altova, which I think was out of Boston, actually. We always said that SoapUI would be the XML Spy for SOAP. It was kind of that was our ambition. It was like the tool that everyone had that was working with XML, and we said we always thought that SoapUI would be the tool that everyone had that was working with SOAP, and actually that has somewhat become true. Although today not that many people work with SOAP anymore. But that was the basic idea, that is scratching that itch, and then. Our team started using it, and everyone, it worked out well. And I gathered feedback on the floor, and then went back home, and during the night added some more features, and then it kind of was a very iterative process, and that's kind of how it came to be as the original tool.
Yeah, and kind of like you just described, and you mentioned before that it really did start as kind of like a hobby project for you, working in those late nights when you had time to do so. I'd love to know when you realized there was maybe the opportunity for it to become something much more than that. Obviously, that comes with a lot more work that needs to go into it. But as it started to grow, the opportunity to make it something even larger started to present itself. How did you kind of decide that was the right thing to do? How did you kind of evaluate the risk of what that would require? More time, if it was time, funding, both, things like that. Just as you started to see the opportunity, how did you kind of evaluate what to do with it at that point?
Yeah, it was as far as I can remember, it was a very iterative process. It was never like I'm going to build a company, you know, or we're going to build this company around SoapUI, or that came pretty late. I think it was just iteratively that we realized that the more people started using it, the more people were happy with it. I started talking to a colleague of mine who eventually became the co-founder of the company around SoapUI, and we started discussing, you know, maybe is there a market niche, you know, could this turn into something that, you know, maybe people would, you know, we could find a way to commercialize, and there was nothing else on the market. And, you know, as one thing I always say to people who come with ideas and are afraid that there are already others or somebody's going to steal their ideas, that didn't happen. You know, there was never anyone, we'd never felt any, we were pretty alone in that space, I guess. And at the time there was no GitHub, you know, so we initially, you know, I tinkered on that project and we made it into something that was downloadable, installable. We put it on SourceForge, which was the distribution platform for open source at the time. And I managed to get, I don't remember, I think it was SD Times or some online publication. I just sent them an email, say, hey, there's this new project, and they wrote about it. And from there, I think we just started, people downloaded it, you know, we were happy for every download and everyone using it. And the ball just rolled from there. So we were like, maybe, you know, we could write a business plan around this. And we attended an incubator or kind of a startup academy here in Stockholm where they helped us write a business plan. And, you know, it was very much kind of going back to original, how did you decide? It was very iterative, you know, just do a little, see what happens, and taking that feedback, maybe we could take this one step further. And maybe the dream was always there, you know, maybe this, what if this could be, but it was never that, we never put like the stake in the ground saying this is going to be something really big. It was very much play by ear, those initial years at least.
Cool. So as you started to kind of touch on something, I wanted to skip ahead and get to one question that kind of came to mind. But, you know, you and I spoke before this episode, and you said that, you know, SoapUI was not the traditional open source project as far as what most people might kind of imagine an open source, you know, or an open source product being, with a large community, you know, kind of all collaborating around it. Could you share a little bit more about that? I'd love to kind of know where that created an opportunity for yourself or for your co-founder who was also working on it. And also if that resulted in any kind of interesting challenges as well, going kind of the atypical from what most think of when they think of a collaborative, large community contributing to an open source product.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, we've thought about this. I mean, really to your point, SoapUI was never kind of that project where we had a bunch of people collaborating and submitting code, etc. And I mean, being self-critical, we never tried to make it into that kind of project. We tried to solve the problem that our target audience had, which was make it easy to test web services, SOAP web services. And that was our primary focus. I did all the development, and then my co-founder did everything else, which was quite a lot, right? So, we, in hindsight, I'm sure we could have, you know, tried to maybe reach out to those initial adopters of the tool and ask them, would you like to be, you know, part of the development community, and maybe pull them in, but we just didn't. It was very focused on, you know, solving the problems that our users had. Our users, testers and developers at the time were not super technical, and maybe weren't the kind of people that would jump in to code. Also, I think the platform, I mean, often when you bring this up today, you think of GitHub as a or something like of a super collaborative. SourceForge was far from that, and we were using, I guess, Subversion at the time. It wasn't, or was it CVS? I don't remember. I mean, it was just the tools for collaborating were also very, very different, and the barrier to do that was maybe higher than it is today. Now today it's super easy. Just code the repo, you open the PR. You know, it's so easy for someone to jump in. I think it was probably hard at the time, but also, once again, we didn't make it easy for people. And I also think that just the technologies used in SoapUI, so Swing, which is a framework for creating UIs in Java, is maybe not the kind of hottest framework for developers to kind of want to work on. You know, I think developers at the time, they gravitated towards server, you know, JBoss, which was an application server at the time. There was Hibernate, there was all the Apache projects, and there was a bunch of cool server-side stuff going on. I think there was very few visual tools that maybe drew attention, especially built on Swing. Eclipse was large, but they had their own toolkit. IntelliJ was just just getting started, and yeah. So it's a bunch of factors, but it is an interesting point. Some projects have been super successful as building a big community. I mean, we know Cucumber, the Swagger ecosystem. Both of those teams were extremely successful, or the leaders of those projects, in being all inclusive and getting people on board. But I think that all those also maybe target an audience which is very development savvy, right? It was targets developers directly. So the people using like Swagger tools, they were also the ones that could go in and fix the bug. And same with Cucumber for whatever language, they were maybe probably proficient, and the infrastructure with GitHub, et cetera, was in place. So it was just easier.
Yeah, makes sense.
But to that point though, I don't think I wouldn't say it's wrong either direction. You just go with whatever works. So if you I wouldn't, I don't know if you would call it a failed open source project. It depends on kind of what the measurements are. But I think, it was still hugely successful from an adoption perspective. And I will say that we do get people, we do get contributions still, like, not a lot. There's a handful a year, I would say, but people, I'm guessing those people are scratching their own itch. They're using SoapUI to test something, and then they're realizing that there's some deficiency in the tool, or that it doesn't support maybe some standard that they're using, and then they submit patches. So I think that's great. It's just that it's not something that we've been actively trying to build from our end.
Yeah, definitely.
That was a long answer, sorry.
No, it's great. No, I think it warrants, kind of that explanation, and it all makes sense, kind of, spelling it out that way. And you mentioned Cucumber. I was gonna, we always like to ask this question for this series, and that the companies, the products that SmartBear has acquired over the years are truly all over the place around the globe. And so we have, Cucumber's founders are from Scotland, throughout the UK and Belgium. HipTest founders are from France. Bitbar's founders are from Finland. You are in Sweden. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of give Sweden any credit where it was due, as far as helping you along the way, being a great place to found something like SoapUI, whether it's an entrepreneurial spirit that runs throughout Sweden, or some supportive community, or supportive, for, like you said, for helping you kind of write a business plan, things like that. Was there anything about Sweden in particular that helped you and SoapUI in its early days?
Well, to your point, there was a lot of, and still are a lot of incubators. There's a big, especially now, I guess it's just over the last 10 years, but this was in 2005, so it's 15 years ago. There already at the time, there was, incubators and startup factories, or whatever you want to call it, which was it was easy to apply to. It was very inclusive and very helpful. And so that was good. As I mentioned, we had our second child at the time. You can complain about the Swedish tax system, but you can also, there's a lot of credit going to the childcare that comes out at the other end, right? And the parental leave possibilities. So as I said, I was at home with our son for many months, and that certainly, although of course I spent most of my time with my son, at nights when he was, I had some time over and so on, that definitely gave me some breathing space to maybe embark on this venture. So I think there's definitely credit goes to a lot of the infrastructure, social infrastructure and entrepreneurial infrastructure in Sweden at the time.
And then what are some of the kind of needs or challenges that software delivery teams today are facing today, where SoapUI is kind of continuing to make a big impact? You mentioned that it's been around for, now 20 years. A lot's changed in software development and testing and delivery and deployment and everything else over 20 years. So where are some of the things that, some of the areas that SoapUI is continuing to still be a very relevant part of that
sure.
life cycle?
Well, I think that, we mentioned earlier, SOAP is maybe not the hottest technology. I don't think anyone in their right mind today, or very few would kind of choose that. You'd have some very specific reasons to, but a lot of the systems out there were built 10-15 years ago, and they're still heavy on SOAP, and it's not easy to replace them. So I think they're in large scale environments where you have a mixed bag of SOAP and REST and GraphQL and other types of APIs. I think SoapUI still has a fantastic positioned as it is more or less unique, I think, with its support for those technologies. I think also for what we still see is, although there are a lot of really good lightweight, tools for exploring APIs and maybe doing lightweight API testing, I think really heavyweight or heavy duty API testing, data-driven testing, security testing, all there's I think what most people see is kind of the tip of the iceberg of SoapUI, and there's so much underneath, so much functionality that we kind of built initially, catering to individual needs of our individual users. There's kind of this refactoring functionality. So if you change your API, SoapUI can automatically update all your tests to be in line with those changes. There's functionality for debugging your tests. And I'm not saying this as a sales pitch, but I'm sure that's kind of what it sounds like. I'm just saying more as an example that there's so much under the hood that I think caters to a more really heavy duty kind of functional testing that I just don't think you'll find in many other tools today.
Yeah. So let's talk about when SmartBear acquired SoapUI. For any future or current entrepreneurs out there who may be watching or listening, acquisition
Sure.
is certainly a possibility when you've created a successful product or company. But as we've kind of learned, or as I've learned from some of our other product founders, the people that we've spoken to, that there's a lot that goes into that decision. Our Cucumber and HipTest founders in particular had a lot to say around this, particularly around the roles they wanted to preserve or create for themselves, or return to even for themselves, as well as their concern for just the product that they'd poured so much into, and wanting it to still get to where they had always envisioned it. So I was going to ask if you could share some of your thinking around that time and how you ultimately decided that acquisition was the right move.
I think there was two parts to it. One is just a part of the company. I think when we initially met with SmartBear, we were very clear that there were concern on our side that we didn't want SoapUI to be swallowed by this giant, relatively speaking, and turn into this proprietary software. We were very concerned about that our community, our user community, would be scared away, or how do we kind of maintain this open sourciness of the tool? And I think SmartBear was just extremely good at listening to our thoughts around that and trusting us kind of in how we thought that would be handled. I think that went really, really well. I think we built a great relationship with the leadership at SmartBear at the time. This was in 2011, so 9 years ago. I think, going forward to both HipTest and Cucumber, I remember I spoke specifically a lot with those two teams, during the M&A process around these questions, around these issues. They had questions to me, how was it to be acquired? How do you feel that is SmartBear going to, how are they going to handle this? They're exactly the same fears that we don't want our community to suddenly go away or be scared off. And to be honest, I think for us specifically, it was actually our community said, this is great. This shows that this is a tool that a larger vendor believes in, and you're definitely not going to go away now because you have financial backing behind it. And we were very clear that the open source would still be there, and we never took it away or anything like that. So. And I think it was similar for the other open source projects that have been onboarded, so Swagger, Cucumber, and then HipTest, which is not open source at the time, or not an open source project. But I think that was we just have felt, we trusted them, they trusted us, and that worked out well. I think it was a little bit of a leap of faith, of course. And then on the other side, there's the stability aspect as an entrepreneur. We know with 3 kids, and just the stability that an acquisition gives you, in knowing that your company's, there's a safety net to fall back on if things go up and down. I think that was also something that definitely influenced our decision. So it was both that we felt this was a good match. We felt there was an honest intent from SmartBear to really continue supporting SoapUI as an open source project. I'll also say, Sweden and maybe Europe in general is more known for its technical prowess than it is for its sales and marketing. And I think that was something that we were really impressed with when we met SmartBear initially, just the sales machine and the kind of that we thought that SmartBear could add on top of what we already had for our commercial offering. And that was also, we felt that, you know, SmartBear could take this so much further than we would ever be able to do, and we had really no expertise in that area and didn't know anyone. So that also felt like a great way to take this whole thing to the next level.
Yeah, that's a great tie into the last question that I had for you here. It's that we've asked everybody as well, is that as trying to learn more about what's been the most rewarding part of your journey as an entrepreneur. And it was one of our Cucumber founders that when we asked that, he said it was no longer having to be an entrepreneur. Because he really just wanted to kind of get back to that work that he had kind of been taken away from when you add in all of the things that a growing and successful company requires outside of that original work that they had been doing before taking this into a, you know, an actual company. So I was going to ask what your favorite, you know, kind of part of your journey so far has been, and if you have any kind of parting advice for any other entrepreneurs who may be considering making the leap themselves.
It's a favorite part. I know, just seeing I still meet people who use SoapUI in their work, and they're like, "Oh my God, you created that!" And, you know, it's just that this has always been ego boost, vanity kind of thing, right? So you know, it's knowing that actually we created something that's still around and still helping people and build great software has been fantastic, and just kind of as have been part of that journey and all the steps that, you know, we've taken through all over the years, both, you know, initially before we joined SmartBear, but also after, as SmartBear has grown, and just to see all the things we've learned about how to grow a product from, you know, that nighttime project into what it is today. It's just been extremely rewarding. And then what comes out on the other end is just fantastic. I think when it comes to advice for entrepreneurs, I think I think I sometimes I admire, or when I meet young entrepreneurs, they're always like, "We're going to change the world." You know, they're very naive, but in a good way. And the advice I'd like to give is keep that and you know, trust yourself and your gut feeling and that enthusiasm that you can change the world. I always feel like there's always a fear that I'm going to go in and say, "Oh, but you don't forget about this and that." I don't want to take away that enthusiasm of saying. So I'd say to an entrepreneur, you know, run with it, believe in yourself, believe in your idea. If you have a feeling there's something there, you know, go for it, and don't let, you know, the people who are 20 years older, you know, scare you away with, you know, boring political or bureaucratic stuff. I mean, there might be something in there that's correct, but usually if you're a smart person, you'll find your way, right? You'll pivot a little and you'll adapt, but I think it's really important to keep that drive going and believing in yourself. So I think that's I think the most important thing, I would say, when meeting entrepreneurs, that, you know, sometimes people just feel they're like, you know, they're almost combusting with enthusiasm and energy. Right. And just, you know, just go for it, you know, and all the best. That's kind of,
that's great. That's awesome. I think that's great advice, because I totally agree that you certainly can take on some more jaded views later in life, and if you've still got that energy, you should definitely hang on to it, because it's a great motivator to keep going. So
yeah, and even if you aren't going in the perfect direction, that energy is going to usually, you know, usually you're not alone. There's some people around you. You'll be able to maybe find, as I said, you know, pivot around, but just keeping that energy going is that's what really matters at that point.
Yeah. That's great. That is a great point to end on. It's also the last question that we had for you, so it works out that way. But I want to thank you very much for joining us today, Ule. And
thank you so much.
At the same time, I want to thank everybody for joining us who's listening and watching as well.